Introduction to the couple. The morning sun filtered gently through the white curtains, casting a warm golden hue across the bedroom. Emma stirred awake to the sound of birds chirping outside and the soft aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafting through the air. She smiled to herself, a simple, content smile, the kind that comes from knowing you're exactly where you're meant to be. Her husband, Daniel, was already up. He had always been the early riser between the two of them, often sneaking out of bed to prepare her favorite breakfast before she woke up. This morning was no different. As she walked into the kitchen, wrapped in her robe, he turned around with a grin and held out a plate with 2 perfectly scrambled eggs, toast, and a side of strawberries. "Morning, beautiful," he said, kissing her on the forehead. "Hope you're hungry." Life with Daniel felt like a dream come true. They had met 5 years ago at a mutual friend's engagement party. He was charming, well-spoken, with kind eyes that seemed to understand her from the first moment. It didn't take long before they were inseparable. Within a year, they were engaged. By the second year, married. Their home, a cozy 2-bedroom townhouse nestled in a peaceful suburb, reflected their shared tastes, soft tones, personal touches, and an air of comfort. They spent weekends redecorating, cooking together, or hosting game nights with friends. Daniel made her laugh until she cried, remembered the small things, and supported her every dream. From the outside, they were the perfect couple, and Emma, in her heart, believed that too. She had a job she enjoyed, a part-time graphic designer who worked from home, and Daniel was a software developer at a firm downtown. Their schedules complemented each other, allowing for plenty of time together. Evening walks, impromptu movie nights, spontaneous weekend getaways, these were staples of their relationship. Friends often remarked how lucky she was to have a partner so thoughtful and attentive, and she believed it. Daniel never forgot an anniversary, always left sweet notes on the fridge, and never failed to say, "I love you," every single day. There was trust, laughter, and what seemed like an unshakable bond between them. But even in this seemingly perfect world, there were moments, a glance she couldn't quite interpret, a hushed tone on the phone, a vague explanation for a missed call, that passed by unnoticed, or were brushed off with a loving kiss or a reassuring smile. To Emma, these were minor things, nothing more than the noise of a busy life. After all, love was never perfect, and she had always believed that their love, though imperfect, was real. She didn't know it then, but this world she so lovingly cherished was built on cracks too small to see. Cracks that, one by one, would widen until the entire foundation of their relationship began to collapse. But for now, in this moment, she was happy. She thought they were happy, and that was enough. Everyday bliss. The days flowed like a gentle stream, each one filled with moments that felt too good to question. Emma and Daniel had settled into a rhythm that felt almost cinematic, a life where love didn't just exist, it thrived. Mornings were their quiet ritual. Daniel would always make the coffee, 2 mugs side by side, his with a dash of cream, hers black with a hint of cinnamon. They'd sit on the back porch together, wrapped in matching sweaters during the cooler months, sharing sleepy smiles and soft conversations about dreams, plans, or nothing at all. Emma's days were spent working from her sunlit home office, her headphones on as she designed logos and layouts for clients across the city. Daniel would occasionally pop in, bringing her tea or simply leaning down to kiss the top of her head. "You're amazing," he'd whisper, like a habit he never wanted to break. Evenings were their favorite time. They cooked together most nights, a dance of chopping, stirring, and stealing tastes from each other's spoons. Laughter came easy, often over shared stories or inside jokes they'd built over the years. Emma would tease him about his inability to cook rice without turning it into mush, and he'd joke that she burned toast on purpose just so he'd make breakfast. After dinner, they curled up on the couch, a blanket draped over them, their dog Daisy nestled between them. Whether it was rewatching their favorite series or binging documentaries no one else found interesting, they shared everything. Their hands always found each other, their fingers intertwined like it was the most natural thing in the world. Weekends were spontaneous. Sometimes it was farmers' markets and brunch dates, other times hiking through trails or simply lying in bed until noon. They had a bucket list of things to do together, places to visit, foods to try, books to read aloud. It was a partnership built not just on love, but on shared curiosity and mutual joy. Their friends adored them as a couple. Emma's best friend, Lucy, often called them the blueprint, saying, "If I don't get what you and Daniel have, I don't want it at all." And Emma would blush, laughing it off, secretly feeling proud that she had found something so many others were still searching for. There were photo albums on their shelves filled with moments that told a story: anniversary trips, silly selfies, beach sunsets, cozy snow days. Emma had started a scrapbook titled Us, filled with Polaroids, concert tickets, and handwritten notes. She'd look through it often, sometimes when Daniel was away on business, just to remind herself how lucky she was. They said, "I love you," like punctuation, held hands out of habit, and believed in each other without hesitation. In Emma's heart, their life wasn't just good, it was rare. What she didn't realize, though, was that perfection can be the best disguise, and behind the smiles, there were things left unsaid. Secrets can hide in laughter, too. Subtle red flags. It started so quietly that Emma barely noticed at first. A shift so small, it felt like a change in the wind. Daniel began coming home later than usual. At first, it was just once or twice a week. He'd text her, apologizing, saying meetings ran long or traffic was a nightmare. It wasn't unlike him, he had a demanding job after all. But there was something in the way he said it now. The messages felt templated, like copy-paste excuses. Emma brushed it off. Everyone gets busy. Relationships have seasons. But then came the phone calls. Short, clipped ones he took in the hallway or out in the backyard. When she'd ask who it was, he'd smile quickly and say, "Just work stuff," before changing the subject. One night, he even stepped out mid-dinner, murmuring something about a client emergency before disappearing for over 20 minutes. He returned with a rushed apology and cold food, but no real explanation. He also started guarding his phone more. It was subtle, flipping its screen down when they were together, keeping it in his pocket instead of on the counter like he used to. He'd laugh off any mention of it, calling her paranoid with a teasing smile. But something about it didn't feel playful. It felt dismissive. Emma tried not to overthink it. She told herself that people change. Maybe he was just stressed. She even asked if everything was okay at work, if he was overwhelmed, or if she could help. He assured her, "Everything's fine, Em. Really, just tired, that's all." But his tiredness wasn't just physical. He stopped initiating conversations about their day, their plans, or their dreams. They still shared the same bed, but sometimes it felt like she was lying next to a stranger. His laugh came less often. His eyes, once so full of warmth, now seemed distracted, like he was always somewhere else in his mind. One night, as she folded laundry, she found a receipt in the pocket of his jeans. It was from a restaurant she didn't recognize. Expensive, fancy. She didn't remember going there. She stared at the date. Last Thursday. The same night he told her he was working late and had skipped dinner. Her heart thudded slow and heavy, but still she told herself there could be an explanation. A work dinner maybe, a client meeting. She left the receipt on the counter, said nothing, and watched him carefully that night. He didn't mention it, didn't seem surprised to see it sitting there. He just tucked it into a drawer and kissed her cheek like everything was normal. Emma smiled back, but a cold doubt had started to bloom in her chest. These weren't accusations, not yet. They were just questions with no answers. But for the first time, she felt the tiniest crack in the world she had believed was perfect. And once you see a crack, you can't unsee it. Growing suspicion. Emma sat alone on the edge of their bed, the glow from her phone casting a soft light on her face. Daniel had gone out for a late meeting again. It was almost 10 p.m. She'd tried reading, tried watching a show, even took a bath. Anything to distract herself. But the uneasy feeling wouldn't leave. It clung to her like static, quiet and persistent. She couldn't shake it anymore. Something was different. Not loud or obvious, but present, creeping in like a slow fog. His routines had shifted. He used to leave his laptop open on the kitchen table, emails half-written, tabs about work projects and football scores. Now it was password locked and always shut. His phone never buzzed aloud anymore. It lived on silent, always within reach. She'd once laughed when he dropped it in the toilet, and they'd spent an hour with it in a bag of rice. Now, if she so much as touched it, his gaze would flick toward her a little too quickly, like she'd crossed a line. Still, she told herself, maybe he was just under pressure. Work stress, new responsibilities. Maybe he needed space. That happens, right? Even in good marriages. But her mind was no longer content with maybe. She started noticing things. A cologne she didn't recognize faintly lingering on his jacket. The way he was suddenly very interested in going to the gym, something he'd never cared about before. The way he didn't say, "I love you," as automatically. Sometimes he'd pause, just for a second, before responding. Emma found herself rewinding conversations in her head, picking apart his words, watching his eyes for signs of guilt, reading between the lines of every smile. Her heart had started racing when he got a text, especially if he tilted the screen away. But whenever she got too close to confronting it, a wave of guilt would crash in. Don't be that wife. Don't be dramatic. Don't ruin a good thing over your own imagination. He hadn't done anything wrong, technically. No bruises, no screaming matches, no cheating she could prove. Just a soft, unsettling quiet growing between them. She started second-guessing herself. Maybe she was insecure. Maybe she was too sensitive. Maybe she'd watched one too many crime dramas where the loving husband was always hiding something. So she overcompensated, cooked his favorite meals, laughed a little harder at his jokes, tried to bring back the warmth between them. She told herself relationships go through phases. This was just a low tide, but every time he left without saying where he was going, or gave her a vague excuse, a voice inside her whispered, "He's lying." It wasn't a scream, not yet, just a whisper. But it was growing louder, and while her mouth still formed smiles, and she still kissed him goodnight, her heart had started keeping score of everything. The turning point, 500 words. It was a rainy Thursday when Emma found it. Daniel had rushed out that morning, already late for a team strategy session. He kissed her cheek absent-mindedly, coffee in one hand, phone in the other. "Don't wait up tonight," he said casually. "Might be a long one." She stood by the window after he left, watching the blur of his car disappear into the gray drizzle. Something felt wrong, not just different, wrong, like she'd woken up in a world that looked like hers but didn't quite fit anymore. Later that afternoon, while cleaning up the living room, she noticed Daniel's jacket still draped over the back of the chair. She almost left it, almost, but her hands moved on their own, pulling it closer to hang up. Something heavy shifted in the pocket. She reached in and pulled out a folded piece of paper, a receipt. Her heart stuttered. The Belmore Hotel, room 412, one guest, overnight stay, 2 nights ago. Emma stood frozen, the paper trembling in her hand. She scanned it again, hoping, desperately hoping, it was for a work event, a last-minute booking for an out-of-town client, something. But she knew Daniel hadn't said anything about traveling. 2 nights ago, he'd told her he was working late and staying with a friend in the city to avoid traffic. He hadn't mentioned a hotel. Not once. She sat on the couch, the receipt spread out on the coffee table like a crime scene. The date stared up at her, mocking. Her mind raced through scenarios, each one more painful than the last. Maybe he was planning a surprise? A getaway for their anniversary? Maybe, but their anniversary was months away. And Daniel had never been secretive about gifts or surprises. Then her phone buzzed. A text from him. "Crazy day. Hope yours is going better. Miss you. Miss you." She looked at the message, then back at the receipt, and for the first time in months, something inside her cracked. Later that evening, while folding laundry to calm her nerves, his iPad lit up on the kitchen counter. They were synced, his phone and tablet. She had forgotten all about that. A message popped up. "Last night was amazing. Wish you didn't have to leave so early." No name. Just a number. A heart emoji at the end. Emma didn't breathe. Her hands grew cold. She opened the message thread, her heart pounding louder than the rain still tapping at the windows. Dozens of texts, late-night flirty messages, hotel details, photos, some blurry, intimate, some sent from Daniel. Every doubt she'd suppressed, every excuse she'd made for him, burned up in an instant. This wasn't in her head. It wasn't a phase. It wasn't stress or overthinking. It was betrayal, real and undeniable. And just like that, the illusion shattered. Confrontation avoided. Emma sat at the kitchen table long after the house had gone quiet, the soft hum of the refrigerator the only sound. The hotel receipt was back in her hand, now creased at the corners from being folded and unfolded a dozen times. The iPad sat beside her, dark and still, but the damage had been done. She knew, but she didn't confront him. Not yet. She wanted to. She imagined it, throwing the receipt at him, reading the messages aloud, demanding the truth with tears in her eyes. But something held her back. Maybe it was disbelief, maybe fear, or maybe it was the aching need to understand the whole story before it blew everything apart. So instead of waking him, instead of screaming or crying or demanding answers, Emma chose silence. For now. The next morning she greeted him with a smile, hiding the storm beneath her skin. Daniel kissed her forehead and thanked her for making coffee. She nodded. He didn't notice her eyes lingering on his face longer than usual, watching for any flicker of guilt. He didn't seem guilty. He seemed normal, comfortable in the lie. Over the next few days, Emma became someone else entirely, part wife, part detective. She began quietly collecting pieces of the puzzle. She checked their shared bank account, scrolling through transactions she'd never paid attention to before. There it was, flowers she never received, dinners she hadn't attended, rideshare receipts to unfamiliar addresses. She even created a fake email and sent a reservation inquiry to the hotel. When they confirmed Daniel had stayed there that night, and alone, her hands trembled as she read it. She noticed other things too. Lipstick stains on his shirt collar once, faint, but there. A pair of earrings in the back seat of the car, tucked into the corner where the seat met the floor mat. Not hers. She didn't say a word. She followed his social media more carefully. His location tags, likes, even comments. Nothing overt. But Emma had learned to read between the lines. A pattern was there. A woman whose name he'd mentioned once, casually, as a colleague. She now felt like a ghost, following them, invisible to everyone but Emma. Still, she played the part. She laughed when she needed to, made dinner, went to bed beside him, listened to him talk about work. It felt surreal, living a lie with someone who looked you in the eye every day and smiled as if nothing was wrong. But beneath that calm exterior, Emma was building her case. She wasn't planning revenge, not yet. What she needed was the truth, every corner of it. No more guesses, no more hoping she was wrong. Because once she had it, there'd be no turning back. And when she finally spoke, she wanted to be ready, not just to confront him, but to walk away if she had to. The harsh reality. It was a Tuesday when Emma found the final piece. Daniel had left his laptop open on the desk, something he hadn't done in months. Maybe he'd grown careless. Maybe he thought she was still blind. Either way, it was a mistake. Emma's pulse quickened as she approached it, her fingers hesitating just above the trackpad. She knew she shouldn't invade his privacy. But was it really invasion if the truth was already spilling into her life, uninvited? She clicked. An email thread popped up immediately, as if fate had left it there for her. Subject line: this weekend, can't wait to see you again. The sender: Marissa Thompson. Emma's stomach dropped. The name she'd suspected, the woman from work, the one he'd said was barely more than an acquaintance. But this email wasn't professional, not even close. Marissa had attached pictures, photos of the two of them at a winery, arms wrapped around each other, smiling like it was all so normal. There was a note beneath one of the photos. "I love how free we are when we're together. You don't have to pretend with me." Emma scrolled further, scanning messages that stretched back months, late-night confessions, intimate language, references to hotels, plans for vacations, even inside jokes, ones that Daniel and Emma used to share, now repurposed with someone else. But what shook her most wasn't the affair, it was what came next. In one message, Marissa had written, "Did you tell her yet? You promised you'd file by the end of the month. I don't want to be the other woman forever." File. Emma's eyes caught on the word, and her breath caught with it. She clicked into another folder, labeled Legal. Her heart pounded. Inside was a draft of divorce paperwork. Her name, his, their marriage date, financial disclosures. He hadn't filed them yet, but the documents were real, signed by him, dated 2 weeks ago. He had already made his decision. He wasn't just cheating, he was preparing to leave, quietly, on his terms, and he hadn't said a word. Tears welled in Emma's eyes, but she didn't cry, not yet. Instead, she sat down, staring at the glowing screen as if it might blink and erase what she'd just seen. It was all a performance. The kisses, the dinners, the morning coffees, the miss you texts. A distraction to keep her unsuspecting, to buy time while he arranged his escape. She felt sick. The man she had built her life with wasn't just unfaithful, he was cowardly. Instead of ending things honestly, he had chosen lies, layers of them, enough to bury everything they'd built. The hardest part wasn't even the betrayal. It was realizing she didn't really know him at all. Not anymore. Emotional breakdown. Emma stood in the living room, her hands trembling, the laptop screen still glowing in front of her. She hadn't moved in what felt like hours. The weight of the documents, the photos, the emails, it was all too much. She couldn't breathe. It was like her lungs had forgotten how to do their job. She looked at the walls around her, the ones that had held so many happy memories. Family gatherings, quiet evenings with Daniel, their first Christmas together. She had painted these moments with love, thinking they were built on something solid, but now they felt like ghosts, fading from existence. Everything was a lie. Every laugh, every tender moment, every "I love you," a lie. Emma sank onto the couch, her body heavy as if all the weight of the world had suddenly landed on her shoulders. She buried her face in her hands, trying to hold back the tears, but they came anyway, uncontrollable, burning hot. They spilled down her cheeks, each drop a small piece of her heart breaking away. How could he do this? How could he pretend to be the man she thought he was, all while secretly plotting an escape? Was she just a placeholder? A backup plan while he waited for someone he cared more about? She shook her head, unable to reconcile the man she thought she knew with the stranger she now saw in the email thread, in the lies he'd lived, in the betrayal he'd carefully concealed. Her mind raced with thoughts. What did I miss? What could I have done differently? But she knew deep down that this wasn't about her. It wasn't her fault. This was Daniel's choice, Daniel's secret life. He had made a decision to deceive her, and she had been blind enough to believe him. But that didn't stop the flood of questions. What had she done wrong? Had she stopped being enough for him? Was she not pretty enough, or interesting enough, or exciting enough? Did she fail somewhere along the way, quietly, without even knowing? Her chest ached with the weight of those questions, and for the first time in years, Emma didn't recognize herself. Who was she really without this version of her life? Without the love she thought she had? The worst part was the confusion over why. Why go through all the motions of a marriage if he knew he was done? Why stay in the house pretending it was real when he was already gone, emotionally, if not physically? Why hadn't he just ended it before? But she wasn't sure she could face those answers. Not now. Not yet. She heard the door click open upstairs, the sound of his shoes hitting the hallway. Daniel was home. Her breath hitched. The tears came harder. She didn't want to see him. She didn't want to hear his excuses, his reassurances, his lies. She didn't know if she had the strength to confront him yet. All she knew was that her entire world had collapsed in an instant, and she was still struggling to breathe through it. Emma closed her eyes, the reality of the betrayal settling over her like a heavy blanket. She felt lost, like she didn't even know who she was anymore. How could you find yourself again when the person you thought you knew best was the one who broke you? The confrontation. The house was quiet when Daniel walked in, his jacket tossed carelessly onto the chair. Emma sat in the living room, her body stiff, her eyes red from the tears she hadn't been able to stop. She had never felt so disconnected from him, even as he stood in the doorway, his smile faltering as he saw her. "Em? What's wrong?" His voice was soft, concerned, the kind of tone that used to comfort her. But today it felt like a mockery. She didn't answer right away. She couldn't. The lump in her throat was too thick. For a long moment she simply stared at him, the weight of what she knew pressing down on her chest like a vice. Finally she spoke, her voice shaking but steady. "I know everything, Daniel." His eyes widened, but he didn't move. "What do you mean?" "You know exactly what I mean." Emma stood up slowly, her hands trembling at her sides. She felt the rage beginning to build, but there was something else too. Hurt, a raw, aching wound that throbbed with every breath she took. She pulled the laptop toward her, opening it to the email thread. "I found this." She shoved the screen toward him, the words flashing on the display like daggers. His face drained of color as he read them, the facade of innocence quickly crumbling. "Emma, he began, but she cut him off, her voice rising. "Number, don't you dare lie to me right now. I've seen everything. The hotel receipts, the messages, the divorce papers, everything!" Her heart pounded in her ears, and the adrenaline flooded her veins, a rush of anger and betrayal so intense that her hands shook. Daniel stood frozen, his eyes flicking from the screen to her face, his mouth opening and closing like he was struggling to form words. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out?" she spat, her words sharp, cutting through the room like a blade. "Did you think I was too stupid to see the signs? The lies? You've been planning this for months, Daniel. You've been lying to me about everything, about work, about who you're with, about where you've been, and all while pretending like everything was fine." "Emma, please, just let me explain," he pleaded, his voice shaky now, the facade slipping. But she wasn't interested in explanations anymore. The truth was out, and it had already done its damage. "No," she whispered, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and sorrow. "There's nothing to explain. You've already made your choice. You've already left me. You just didn't have the courage to say it out loud. So, spare me the 'I'm sorry, and I didn't mean for it to happen.' You've already been living your life without me. I've just been too blind to see it." Tears sprang to her eyes again, but this time they were not just from hurt. They were from the realization that her world was gone. This wasn't just about an affair. It was about everything that had been a lie. The love, the trust, the future they had planned together. It was all a fiction. Daniel reached for her, but she stepped back, shaking her head. "Don't touch me," she said quietly, her voice breaking. "You've lost the right to do that." The silence between them was suffocating. Neither of them moved, the space between them vast and cold. He didn't know what to say, didn't know how to fix what was already broken beyond repair. Emma looked at him one last time, her heart heavy with the weight of her decision. "You've already made your choice, Daniel, and I'm done being the woman you walk away from when things get hard." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving him standing in the doorway, his guilt and excuses hanging in the air between them like an unsaid confession. The aftermath and empowerment. The days after the confrontation felt like they moved in slow motion. Emma didn't know if it was the shock of the betrayal or the weight of her own decision, but time seemed to stretch out endlessly, each minute like an eternity. She could hear Daniel moving around the house, his presence still heavy, still uncomfortable. He didn't try to apologize, didn't beg for forgiveness. Instead, he retreated into himself, trying to make sense of the wreckage. But Emma couldn't care less about his confusion. She had made her decision. And though she felt hollow, heartbroken, and raw, there was something else growing inside her, a quiet sense of strength that had been buried under years of complacency. She was tired of being the woman who put everyone else's needs before her own. She was tired of trying to fix something that was broken beyond repair. She began to pack, not in anger or haste, but in quiet resolve. One by one, she folded her clothes into a suitcase, her favorite dress, the cozy sweater he loved to see her in. There were no tears this time, no angry outbursts, just the sound of zippers, the weight of her choices, and the knowledge that this was the moment she would reclaim her life. When Daniel came downstairs, she was standing by the front door, the suitcase at her feet. He stopped in his tracks, his face a mask of confusion and desperation. "Emma, what are you doing?" "I'm leaving, Daniel," she said softly, her voice steady, despite the flood of emotions inside her. "I can't keep pretending. This isn't the life I want anymore." He took a step forward, his voice rising. "Please, don't do this. We can fix this. We can talk through it. I made a mistake. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." She shook her head. "It's too late for that. I've been living in a lie for months, Daniel. You don't get to come in and fix it just because you're uncomfortable with the consequences of your actions. I've spent too much of my life forgiving, too much of it trying to hold on to something that was never really there." Her words hit him like a slap. He opened his mouth to argue, but Emma held up a hand, stopping him. "I'm not angry anymore. I'm just done." She stepped past him, the weight of the suitcase now feeling light in her hand. She didn't need his permission. She didn't need his apologies. All she needed was to walk out that door and reclaim the woman she had lost along the way. As she stepped outside, the cool breeze hit her face like a fresh start. The world didn't feel like it had collapsed in on itself. It felt like a beginning, her beginning. The next few weeks were a blur, sorting through the pieces of her life, finding a new apartment, reconnecting with old friends she'd neglected. But through it all, Emma felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was thriving. And for the first time in a long time, Emma felt proud of herself. Not because she had left, but because she had chosen herself. She had chosen to stand up, to face the truth, and to walk away from a life that wasn't hers anymore. She had taken back the control that had been stolen from her, piece by piece, for years. And in that power, she found a strength she didn't know she had. The woman she was becoming was one who would never again allow someone else to define her worth.